There we go.
Suffrage.
Hi, I'm Crystal Williams. I'll be giving a speech today about Alice Paul, a women's rights suffragist, and this is my little drawing here of Alice Paul, and basically this represents the fact that she's so important to our country and about freedom, and it says, "America, land of the free, home of the brave." And the person I'm going to tell you about today is an extremely brave and important historical figure in our time. In 1920, the amendment passed giving women the right to vote, and it was actually the 19th Amendment, and what you may or may not know is the hard struggle that the suffragists went through to get this passed. A suffragist is basically a women's rights activist. They fought hard to get this amendment passed. They fought hard for women's rights, and they were called suffragists. Alice Paul was one of the main leaders during this time period, and basically she was a lawyer and a suffragist, and basically she was really smart and extremely educated, so she always fought really hard to achieve, but also she was really strong-willed, and because of this she fought hard to succeed in changing history and changing things for women like she wanted to do. In her early life, she was born to a Quaker family, and she grew up on Paulsdale Farm. It was her family farm, and her father was a great businessman. She probably got a lot of her brains from him. And basically, this was in New Jersey, actually, and she was the firstborn. She had two brothers, to give a little more family background, and she graduated first in her class. So this was the early 1900s, and you got this woman here during that time graduating first in her class. So she was up there. She went to, later on, after graduating, she went to the University of Pennsylvania and received her PhD in political science in 1912, the year the Titanic sank. And after that, she became a part of the WSPU, and this was the group of the suffragists that really fought hardcore for women's rights. And this is where she met her best friend, Lucy Burns, who's also a major leader for the women's right to vote. This particular group of women were involved in a lot of protests. They would pretty much stop at nothing to fight for their cause. The problem was this was during wartime, under President Woodrow Wilson's presidency, and it's really bad to go against a wartime president. So, they got a lot of criticism for that. They were treated very, very badly, and they were. But despite the way they were treated, Alice Paul, actually, she believed in the statement, "Give me liberty or give me death." You may know Patrick Henry's statement. And but a little while later, they were arrested. All of the suffragists, 218 suffragists, all arrested, and they were charged by Woodrow Wilson, once again, a wartime president, so it was hard for anyone to really fight for them to be let out because it looked bad. And the conditions in the prison were really, really bad. Like, there were maggots in the food and everything. So the women went on a hunger strike, but nonetheless, they were still force-fed. Like, then they went to court, and they could have been let out of court, actually, but like, they would have only had to pay $10, which back then that's a little more than now, but it was still a small fine. They would have only had to pay $10 to get out, but it would have meant that they would have been admitting to a crime, which they didn't commit any. All they were doing was protesting. It was free speech. So they chose to stay in prison for 60 days and to not eat or anything, and when they could have paid that small fine, because they didn't want to admit to a crime. No matter how small the fine was, they didn't want to admit to that. Basically, this is really what made a difference, though, because people saw this huge difference they were making by standing up for their rights that hardcore and going out on a limb there. They were released later on, and the arrest of the 218 suffragists was declared unconstitutional. The amendment giving the women the right to vote was passed in 1920, and later on in the 70s, there was another amendment for women's rights that wasn't ratified yet, but there was more things it was working on. And then there was another act, which you may know, about women being treated equally in the workplace. And so really you can contribute that back to Alice Paul too, because had she not fought early on for women's rights when we had none at all, then we wouldn't be where we are today, you know. And in conclusion, Alice Paul was an amazingly smart suffragist and lawyer, and she was very strong-willed, and had it not been for her, then women wouldn't be where they are today in the workforce or in America. We wouldn't be where we are today without Alice Paul.
We have a question.
Sure.
Was Alice Paul involved in the burning of the bras? Was that the same thing?
She was like really, really old by then. I mean, she was still around to see that stuff happening, but she was really old.
Was that like before or after?
That was way after. That was in the 70s. Yeah.
What is WSPU?
The women's... I can't remember the words for it. It was the Women's Suffrage and...
Political union.
Political union. Yes,
Is that it?
yes, yeah.
Well, see, that drives me crazy. News reporters do that, and it's ABC something or the other, and you're sitting there going, duh.
Yeah, I know it. I'm just...
No, it really, after you used up and got talking about it, you did a lot better.
Thanks.
A little bit slow, you're nervous, and you start your little or giggle. Try not to give a he in there or anything. You get nervous and you... It was good.
I have another question.
Oh, it's still on.
Do you think you'd be friends with Alice Paul if she was around right now?